Alright, so we're in the middle of Hilchos Melicha Siman Ayin Hey. We'll just review a little bit the halachas from Ayin Aleph all the way to Ayin Hey, because these are the Simanim that deal with very unique internal organs that most people will not come across. Very few shilas ever come up. I think that this government is not very much pro the consumption of certain organs because of health reasons. So you don't get to see it in the butcher store because simply they don't provide it, they don't sell it. But occasionally it may be available, and it's important to know what the halachas are for those situations, those organs, if they can be salted together with regular meat, if they have to be done differently. And in Siman Ayin Vav, we are going to go into back to normal, back to regular, ordinary meat, but how do you roast meat as opposed to cooking meat? Cooking meat, of course, involves a great deal of preparation between soaking the meat, we said salting it, then rinsing the salt. Then you can do whatever you want with it, especially if you want to cook it, that's the way to do it. But roasting it doesn't really require, does it? Perhaps you can save some steps. So in Ayin Vav, we're going to be leaving the liver, the stomachs, and all the other interesting organs, and going back to Basar, but Basar Litzli. So far we've seen Sli associated with kavod. We've seen the roasting as a method of preparation for liver, and for other organs that, according to some opinions, that's the only way to do it. Otherwise, the plain Melicha will not, resolve it, will not take care of the problem properly. That it's always best to do Sli. So what I think we should do is, I gave you a sheet, and in the sheet you have a sikum, you have a summary of Melicha Tevarim Miyuchadim, how to salt the unique organs, and that of course is discussed between Siman Ayin Aleph all the way to Ayin Hey, and then we'll go back inside Ayin Hey from where we left off. So we started off with the head. Now the head is something that you may occasionally see, because the Sephardim use the head for the real head of a keves, of a sheep, of a ram, for Rosh Hashanah. Sheniyeh rosh v'lo lezanav. Why use a fish? Use the real thing. But I remember speaking to my father-in-law, Shalom, he was a butcher, and he says, the problem with these heads of a sheep, especially, is that they're full of fat. So you have the chelev also to take off. You have the nikor. You have a lot of work. There's parasites in there sometimes. A lot of cleaning to do. So it's not easy to prepare it. Before you even get to salting it, before you even get to preparing it, if you have a plan to eat from it, it requires more than the ordinary preparation, and not everybody likes it. Not everybody likes the head of a fish either, to eat. First of all, there's not that much meat in there, but we eat it, of course, symbolically in Rosh Hashanah. Or you can cook it with other fish, perhaps for the flavor of it. But in some fish, by the way, you do have to watch out for parasites too. Occasionally there's a problem with that too.
What is the problem?
Depending on which parasite it is. No, it's also to eat. Certain ones, certain worms are. Yeah, certain ones, depending which worm it is. Certain worms are kosher. It sounds funny, but it all depends where they came from. Yeah, and this could be, of course, complicated, and that is today. For some reason, it's a controversial halacha about certain fish, because there's different opinions as to the worm that the mechaber is speaking about, that he mentions such a fish, if that's the one they're actually finding these or not. So there's two camps, basically.
What does the mechaber say about this one?
Yeah, no, that's not a problem. It's just, it's part of the fish, in a sense. Without getting into the details right now of why, which is a whole parsha in itself, but mechaber is matter, and everybody would agree with the mechaber if they knew that this was the worm, because that's the halacha. The mechaber tells us what the halacha is about that. So the question is not what the halacha is, but which worm is it? So anyway, it could become an issue sometimes in a fish. See worm. Well, if you see it, just remove it. Obviously, if it's easy to remove. So with a rosh, you do have meat on the rosh of anything, of any animal, of a chicken, of the bird, of the.
No, by fish you wouldn't really.
No, melicha by fish, no, it's not a problem, not at all. But I'm talking about fish. Chicken, birds, animals. The whole animal needs melicha, even the tail. Anywhere where there is meat. However, there are certain parts that are really not an issue because they simply don't contain blood, right? But that's because it's not really basar. It's something else. So we'll get to that soon. So beginning with the rosh, we have what you recall the following steps. One is to cut it up, so we can salt it from the inside out. In other words, inside and outside. Or just take out the brain or make a hole through it and make sure that the hole, wherever you puncture the hole, is facing down. So whatever blood comes out, drips out, is dripping down. So that was the preparation part of it, to cut it up as much as possible or to perforate it. And then we said that the best, of course, way to prepare it was bitzliya. Bitzliya meaning to roast it. And I believe that's the way most people do it with the head of an animal.
So then summary, the process for that would be to cut it up, salt it.
Yeah. In other words, even if the Mechaber added that even though it still has hair, the hair is not like the feathers of a chicken, that we would prevent the salt from coming out. That's all he adds over there in Ayin Aleph. And let me see over here. What is that? The hair. Yeah. Well, the bull may not have so much hair. Yeah.
They all have fur. Sheep has fur all over the body.
Right. Well, some have more, some have less. Exactly. Yeah.
They have
Yeah, sure. You've never seen it?
No.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
They grow hair?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
I mean, horses have a mane.
No. We're not talking about major hair. A little bit of hair coming out.
And you don't take off the skin? Skin the animal before you?
Well, obviously.
So then
if you want to do it properly, you would skin it and everything, and then you wouldn't have.
Off anyway,
yeah, obviously, right.
How does the hair play a role?
If you didn't do that.
Skin it.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Anyway, just trying to see if they actually describe the next step over there, or is it just, I guess, what's more commonly done, and that is to roast it. I don't see any other option. Let me just see it again inside. The Chaber says actually, "Mutar afilu likdera." It would be mutter if you did it if you did it properly, you would even be able to cook it. Yeah. But anyway, that would be basically the way you would do it. You would prepare the head, and I think that the tzli is what's done usually with the head. Then we went on to the hoofs. The hoofs have also a little bit of meat. That's the tlafaim. Also, it involves cutting them and salting them and having them face down. That was in the same siman. So that was the tlafaim. Yeah, it doesn't say that as far as what's the preferred way of cooking it or roasting it. It was the main condition over there is that you should cut them a little bit, so that the blood should flow freely. That was all.
Have blood.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, and they have some meat. Then we spoke briefly about the bones, regular bones, but bones that have marrow in them. They require melicha, but they don't have to be perforated. You should not salt bones separately with meat. Each one should be separate. Each one should be salted separately. If you did, it's okay. Unless you're salting that bone with its own meat, that's separate. So anyway, so that was the bones. Bones, sometimes, usually the bones that we deal with are bones that have meat on them anyway, so it's not an issue. But if this would be other bones that don't have meat and they have marrow, they should be salted separately. But the evidence, it's okay if they were salted with other meat. Then we went on to the heart in Ayin Beis. The heart was a very unusual kind of an organ. It also requires, that one is very important to actually cut it up well before melicha, or before you roast it if you didn't do it before the melicha. In other words, if you didn't cut it before, you cut it after. But the problem is, if you cooked it without cutting it up, then it becomes a problem. As the Mechaber says in Bishlo B'li Kriya Asur. So the heart could be a problem if you didn't cut it up, because of the concentration of blood, the greater concentration of blood in it. So that would be an issue. That the cutting it up is important. But we did say that most people avoid the heart because it's kosher lechshicha. There's, I think, a consensus on that one, as opposed to the brains and other organs, that it brings forgetfulness. So if you want to remember everything you learned, you don't want to eat heart. Whereas with brains, maybe you'll get you'll increase your IQ. I don't know about that, but because it's brains of an animal, right? But they're very tasty. What do they call them in English? Something bread? Sweet bread? Sweet? Sweet bread, something like that. Yeah, I think in Iran they serve it also. So,
olives they say bring us as well.
Well, that's the Gemaras. It depends how many olives. Yeah.
So you can put olive oil on it.
You can add olive oil, right? So with the heart, you cut it up, and then before you do the melicha, and then you do the sli. Even though the Mechaber says you can't cook it. The problem is that if you cooked it without kriya, that's a problem. The problem concerns only cooking without kriya. But if you did sli, I think everything is okay, even though you didn't cut it up. You can cut it up. You can cut it after the sli, and then it's mutar. Okay, so if you're going to be cooking heart, you have to remember how to do that. And even though we didn't cover it here, we did discuss how to do the chal. If you remember that, the udder of the animal, also because of the issue of the milk that may still be there. That requires special preparation too. All right, after the heart, we went on to the lungs. Occasionally, some people do eat lungs. And the Mechaber says that on that, the lechatchila, you should tear out the knoiknois, the tubes of the lungs, before you salt it. But b'diavad, that's mutter too.
That used to be on the table.
The lungs?
Lungs.
You had lungs, yeah?
That are seen to be like lungs.
Right. Well, our what should be like lungs?
Light.
Light?
Yeah.
Oh, because
like the air that's in the lungs.
Oh, because it's very light.
Right.
Yeah. So this is only a minute to cut it up, to take out the knoikness. But otherwise, it's not a major issue. Yeah, so the lungs are less of a problem. Then we went on to liver. In Ayin Gimel, liver was unusual because of its makeup, what it is. It's not exactly meat. It's more like blood, if anything. And according to the Mechaber, even if you were to cook it by itself, he follows that opinion, but only as a b'diavad that it's a mutter. For roasting or for bishul after roasting, you would cut it up a little bit, or like the Ramah said, you make holes in it. And according to the Mechaber, you take away the simpoinas, which are its tubes, the blood vessels. I guess I don't know if they call blood vessels, but the simpoinas that run through the covet that have blood in them. And if you didn't do it before, you remove it later. The Ramah said that to cook it by itself, if it were ever cooked by itself, we're noig to asar it. It's asar. If a balabasta came home and by mistake threw the covet into her pot, whether it's by itself or with other stuff, it's asar. He's lenient actually that you don't need kriya for bishul after tzliya. For just for tzliya itself, you don't need kriya. And for bishul after tzliya, but the evidence mutter if you remove the simpoinas after the tzliya. So the Ramah was a little bit lenient on that. You didn't have to tear out or cut out the simpoinas. And that for the tzliya alone, you don't have to cut it up at all. If you're going to do tzli, it appears that the Ramah was lenient on that also, that you don't need to make any cuts in it. That's the Ramah, but the Mechaber said we do cut regardless. That was in Ayin Gimel. Yeah. So somebody can buy a piece of liver, according to the Ramah, and just go ahead and barbecue it, not do anything with it. But the custom still is, even according to the Ramah, we do salt it a little bit on the outside. So that was the liver. Ordinarily, I believe most of the world, that's the way they prepare liver. They do just roast it. I don't think anybody cooks after roasting it. And cooking it without roasting it is a problem, we said.
You have to have special utensil when you deal with liver, or
Not well. If it's a barbecue at the fire, burns the blood.
And let's say to cut it off with the
No.
have it a little bit.
If it's cold, it's okay. When it's cold, it's not a problem. When it's hot, it would be an issue if it had if a hot piece of liver. Why would it be hot unless you were roasting it?
Right.
So that was with the liver. Then we went on to the spleen, the tahal, right? And that's eaten also by various communities. It looks a little bit like lungs, People fry it with onions. It actually looks a little bit like liver too, cut up in pieces. Actually, maybe even more like liver. And tahal is treated like an ordinary meat, and you can go ahead and cook it after you did melicha. So tahal is not a problem. You don't have to cut it up. You don't have to do anything. It's just like any ordinary meat. You salt it, and then you're fine. You're ready to go. Even though it may be red, the Mechaber says, it's just like ordinary meat. In the halacha, however, of tahal, in Siman Ayin Dalet, that's where we find an interesting Ramah. The Ramah adds some organs that the Mechaber for some reason didn't mention, and that is the testicles, if you remember, and the kidneys. And some people, would want to have every part of the animal they can. When I was in a Mexican slaughterhouse in Mexico, I asked the guys, "What do you do with the horns of the bull?" He says, "We make tacos." I don't know if he meant to seriously, that they grind it, or he was just joking with me. But one of these days I'll find out, because I know the tacos I buy are not with horns. Just plain corn or flour type. But you never know. So, did you ever see a tequila with a worm at the bottom of the bottle? Yeah, did you ever see that? That's the worm that basically lives on that plant of which they make tequila from. It's a special kind of tequila. So that's where they put it into the bottle. Well, it's probably bottled, but I wouldn't want to drink it. You can't have the worm, but you can't have the worm. The question is if the liquid is okay. That's what that's. Yeah. I don't think I would want to remove it and then have the tequila. That's what I'm saying.
Entirely.
You're right. So the Ramah in that Siman brings or mentions those two items, and let me see, where does he? It looks like from the Mechaber it wouldn't be a problem with salting it, but he doesn't say it here. But the Ramah says, Yesham shenagu shelo levashel. Some people have the custom of not cooking the kidneys or the testicles, even after you remove the fats, the nikur of the fats, because there's a lot of blood in it. But B'diavad it says you don't have to worry about it. And you can salt all of these with any other meat, even though they may have more blood, as long as you remove the krumim and the chelib. As we mentioned last time, there are certain organs that have more chelib than others. Some don't have chelib at all. And that before anything is salted, you have to remove the chelib. You cannot salt it with the chelib, otherwise you're in trouble. So that's a very important part of the process of kashering meat, is after you cut it up from the animal, after you were boidek, that there's no sirches, that the animal is kosher, not treif, you basically rinse off the dam ba'in with a hose, you hose it down, and then they start removing the chelib and any of the blood vessels, arteries and so forth that are still there. Then they soak it to soften it, and then they salt it. You don't want to salt it with any chelib remaining on it. So nikur is very important, and if you would eat the back portion of the animal, you would do a nikur of the gidanosha too, of the sciatic nerve, which is a lot more work. You have to dig for it. And when you dig, you're going to be ruining the meat if you don't know how to dig. You're going to be cutting it up in all sorts of ways. It won't have. Part of the preparation of meat is knowing how to cut properly, so that you don't ruin it. So that's what the Ramah says. As long as you've removed all the chelib from it, you can salt it with any other meat. So that does it for the kidneys and testicles. Right. No, we don't touch it. We're concerned that the people are not baki, they're not experts today. But theoretically, somebody is a big expert. You would be able to eat from it. Especially if you had no other meat. But that's the minhag. That has and people basically follow. Ashkenazim follow that. They don't make any exceptions for that.
There are restaurants who do serve
There may be Sephardic or Yemenite, mashgichim and shochtim and so forth, yeah.
So we're not allowed to be able to eat that or not?
Well, if you're invited to, yeah, and it was 100% kosher, you know, yeah, it's not usur. That's the thing is, it's not. We did not accept it as an isser. It's just a minig not to, so it wouldn't have the same weight as an isser would. You know, would you lechatchila? That's another question. But if you basically are in a place where there's no other meat, I don't see any problem with that. As long as you know it's a very good hashgacha, no doubt whatsoever. You know, Pesach you don't want to eat rice in the house of a Persian, and you may not want to eat rice a whole year at his home because he's going to serve it to you for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yeah, you're going to get tired of it. But rice on Pesach the Ashkenazim accepted it as a Isser. It's Asr, like other kitnias. You know, this is not kitnias, but for the similar reasons. So we stay away from it. So with
Rice out there?
no.
Really?
Yeah, well, there's so many other good foods to eat.
Yeah, the Moroccans.
Even though I like rice, you know,
Moroccans
also don't eat rice in Pesach, right? In many ways, they're like the Ashkenaz. So there are certain things that we have conducted ourselves as though something is Asr, and there are basically almost no exceptions for it.
What about the Syrians?
Yeah, they don't eat rice. I'm sorry. Syrians eat rice, yeah, just like everybody else.
The Iraqis.
Also, yeah. I think it's just
definitely.
yeah.
And do too.
Yeah, sure. Oh, Persians without rice, they have nothing to eat.
Yeah. Wait a second. I have to.
You see, remember, Eastern Europe is potatoes and beets.
But I have to.
They don't have rice. What's rice? Yeah.
Because
Lentils too. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But they used to have it in the West.
Yeah. But you see, the Persian balabasta has to make various kinds of palaw. You know what that is? You know, palaw kashmesh. You know, all the different kinds. Some with raisins, some with peas, and some with this and that. Yeah. So they have to make a variety. So because of that, don't take it away from them.
But again, lentils are offered.
Yeah.
Because we had a Persian menu.
Sure.
In the Korea we had a big pot of that.
Yeah. So anyway, whatever is considered an Isser is an Isser. If it's an Isser. And if it was not, they just took it upon us that they were Machmir, that could be looked at a little bit differently. Then we went on to Melichat HaMe'ayin. So last week we entered the Siman Ayin Hey, where we discussed the stomach, which includes the intestines. And just briefly, as you recall, all ruminants, or animals that chew their cud, have basically 4 stomachs. Right? You have the keres, you have the hemses, you have the betakosot, you have the dakin, which is already the intestines. What's the 4th one? You have the hemses, you have the keres, you have the keva, right, which is the stomach. So, and they're all stomachs actually. They serve different purposes in the digestive process of either adding additional acids, further chewing it down, or one particular organ, which is the betakosot, serves to actually remove anything that got in there by accident. It's called in English jargon the hardware stomach. In other words, if a nail fell in, things like that are not really part of the food chain, it would eventually somehow land over there. So it's incredible hashgacha from Hashem, how He provided, separate compartments for separate things. Because these animals, once they swallow the food, and that food gets some liquid on it, it eventually goes back up. That's why it chews the cud. Certain acids are produced by the various stomachs in help further reduce reduce, make it smaller, make the pieces smaller and smaller, until eventually, after it travels through the various stomachs, it ends up in the intestines, and the body gets what it takes, or it takes whatever it needs, and whatever it doesn't need is later on expelled.
So that would be the kind of that hardware part becomes straight, right?
Well, that's Hilchot Trefot. When you learn Hilchot Trefot, especially the 18 major Trefot, you come across these halachot. What if you found a needle? Well, it depends where you found it. Did it go through and through all the way? It was sticking in a little bit. That's where you have to determine this, because there are certain things that would render an animal taref. Sometimes the gases, sometimes there's something stuck in the animal's stomach that does not allow the gas to release out. There's gas buildup, and the animal becomes bloated. You know what bloated means.
Sure.
And then the animal dies. So this is in the stomach area, as a result of something in the stomach area not working well. So the Chachamim knew what they were talking about, what can produce a treifa and what not. And the klal was, could it last a year or not, basically, with that particular problem. So in Melichat HaMiyayim, we only said that generally speaking, like the Mechaber mentions in the beginning, En machzikim dam b'bnei miyayim. For the most part, the miyayim itself, the bnei miyayim, the various organs that make up the stomach area, don't really have blood. Kegon bekeres bekeva bedakinu bechalcholet. Chalcholet, he means the rectum. It means the very edge, the last end of the intestine. They don't usually have blood, as long as it's below Shuman Shalem, as long as it's without the fats on them. So if you look at the sheet, basically we have here as follows. We have the Mechaber, the Shuchan Aruch says that we don't consider them to have any blood. They're therefore mutter without Melicha. But the Shuman, the fats, need Melicha. The Ramah is the one that said that lechatchila they are like other meat and they should be required to have Melicha. So he brings the Yesh Cholkim, he brings the opinion of the ones that say that at least in the Keres, some say that machzikim vadam, afilu b'di'evet also b'keres u'beis ha'koises k'shar basar. So Keres and beis ha'koises, according to some opinions, do have blood, and they would require malicha even b'di'evet. Even though the other ones are lechatchila. In Keres, beis ha'koises, he appears to say that they're not. In other words, they would be also even b'di'evet. Then with the chalchoiles, the Ramah added that if you only salted it from the inside and not from the outside, where you should have, where all the fat is, it's like you didn't do anything. It's not just going to go through the salt. You have to salt it where the shuman is, where the fat is. So with the chalchoiles, you have to go back and salt it again and do it from the outside. Otherwise, if it got cooked like that, if it has fats, it's treif. If you did not cook it, you could still salt it. So that was the chalcholet, which happens to have blood. It happens to have shuman, and shuman does have blood. Yeah, keres, we said that the Shulchan Aruch says does not require, and the Ramah says does require melicha, just keres and beis ha'koises. What about kurkevan? I don't know if we spoke, I think we did start talking about the kurkevan? The kurkevan are the gizzards.
I think you mentioned it.
Yeah, the gizzards are very tasty. In Yiddish they're called the pupik. And the chicken, of course, has the gizzard, not a regular animal. And they are basically the muscles, the intestines of the chicken, of the bird. Actually, that's one of the simanim that it's a kosher bird. How do you know it's a kosher bird? Well, as long as you have eliminated that it's not a bird of prey, it has to have an etzbe yetera. It has to have a fourth finger facing the back, besides the three in the front, like the chicken. It has to have a zefek. It has to have a crop, C-R-O-P, where the food is stored, and it has to have a kurkavan niklaf. It has to have a gizzard, the kind of gizzard that has, you can see it, a layer, it's actually two layers that peel off. You can actually see it, a layer that peels off it. If that's the kind of kurkavan where the food goes in and is further digested, then it's probably a kosher bird. If you can't tell, you can't examine the inside without killing the bird. So if you can't tell, there is another rule. Check out who his friends are. Yeah, because tell me who your friends are, I'll tell you who you are. So if this bird associates with the ravens and the crows and the eagles and the vultures, well, it could be it's straight. But if it's hanging around the pigeons, maybe it's okay. But obviously you can't just depend on that. You have to look at other simanim. How does it catch its prey in the middle of the air?
Especially in our times with pigeons.
Oh. Yeah. So for birds you need a Masorah, because it's not so clear. For birds you need much more Masorah tradition than for a regular animal. You go to Africa right now and you see, a wildebeest. You know what a wildebeest is?
Seen it at the zoo.
You've seen it at the zoo. It's a kosher animal. It is. Split hooves, chews its cud, It looks just like a moose in some ways. It has horns instead of what the moose has. It was a different kind of horn. But there's no Masara on it. Still, the majority opinions of Poskim hold that you don't need a Masara for animals in the same way you need for birds. The Chazon Ish, I think, there are one or two opinions, including the Chazon Ish, that said it appears that we need a Masara for that too. But I don't think everybody holds like that, unless, of course, you live in Bnei Brak, maybe. If you read the Shuchan Aruch, Pashut Pshat, Masara applies to birds. And as we said before, that's why people who came to this country had a problem with the turkey. Well, what's this? What is this? Did we ever eat turkeys? They found communities that ate it. Well, once you know of a community that had the Masara, you can rely on that. So, you can...
Which community?
India. In the Jewish communities in India used to eat turkeys. And I believe in Turkey they eat turkey too. I'm not sure. There were several communities. There are some communities that eat certain grasshoppers. The Torah says it's mutter. Yemenites and Moroccans. But I think for that, some people will just say, no thank you. So even though you may have a Masara, the custom is that we don't eat those unless, you had a real clear Masara. But a regular animal shouldn't be a problem. So here, what we have here now with the kurkava, with the gizzards, is we don't have a clear indicator here in the Mechaber or the Ramah, but we do have a Drisha. If you look at the Torah, you'll find the Drisha speaks about the gizzards. He holds that you don't need the Melicha for the gizzards. They're just like organs.
Black, 2 ends, and...
Listen, I don't think it's black. I see it as pale red. I buy it from time to time.
Oh yeah, inside of it is...
Yeah, it's like two pieces like this.
Brownish.
Brown, semi-red.
Right.
Yeah. Very tasty.
Right.
The turkey gizzards are harder.
Right.
And you can fry it or you can cook it. And it's good. It's muscular, but it's not too hard. And
How do you cook it?
with chicken soup, it's very good.
Right.
The chicken soup, it's a very typical Ashkenaz food, actually. Just that people today don't bother with it for some reason. It's not a very popular dish today in America. Americans, I guess, are just spoiled. I don't know. They have all kinds of other things. But it's a good food. It's a good meat.
Actually, I saw chicken legs.
Yeah.
And what you use this for, the ligament type?
Oh yeah, could be. Yeah. So the Drisha says kurkavan is just like the other internal organs. It doesn't require melicha. The Taz and Shach mention over here, out of the blue, that they would require melicha just like any ordinary meat. That's what I recall here. Yeah, they hold that they would require melicha as well. So that's important to know. Usually when the chicken is slaughtered, the internal organs are removed. So the liver is removed, the heart is removed, and in some places when they sell you the whole chicken, they may stuff back in the chicken in a plastic bag the liver. And then, of course, then you have to remember to take it out and broil it. Unless we said that the whole thing is broiled together, but then you want to make sure that it was not in a plastic bag. Remember, we had that problem. You have to be careful with whole chickens, where the whole thing is whole. As opposed to if it's cut up, there's probably no organs stuck anywhere. The organs have been removed as part of cleaning it. So they just salt everything that will be eaten, except for the liver. The liver, I don't believe they salt. They just put it away and expect you to broil it unless they broil it for you. But according to the Shach and Taz, the kurkavan would need melicha like shar basar. I'm just trying to see if I can find it here. Let's see if it's in here. Yeah, I'm going to check it. I'm going to check for it a little bit later. Yeah, but that the Drisha says you don't, but the Shach and Shach says you do. Okay, the last item is mentioned in Sif Gimel, and I'm going to go back inside and read it again inside, is the Shuman Akanta. The Shuman Akanta is the actual fats on the intestines. People eat, you'd be surprised, there's certain fats that are very tasty. The fat of the tail of the sheep, in Farsi it's called dombe, and in Arabic it's called li'ah. In biblical language, Hebrew it's called aliyah. is very tasty. It's kosher. And there's other various fats that are kosher that are not chaylev, of course. So some of these fats, I'm not talking about the tail fat, this fat, the kanto fat, has blood on it. It has quite a bit of blood, actually, inside of it. So the Mechaber says, Shuman akanta, she'ala dakim, which is on the intestines, mele'ah chutim dakim, mele'im dam, is full of little veins of blood. Lefichach yesh osrim ota l'derah, afilo yedei chaticha u'melicha. Therefore, there are opinions. The Mechaber says that say it's no good, you can't use it for cooking, even if you cut it up and even if you salt it. V'achshav, however, the Mechaber says, noagim eter, we've been lenient on it. Botam chutim shel dam k'shadam baki b'hem, and he says that whoever is really an expert with them, those little filaments of blood, those little veins, if you're really an expert, you can easily pull at them. Motchan v'nifshalim hetev. When you pull at them, you're able to completely eliminate them till there's nothing left of them.
What, pull them?
Pull them. You pull the...
Right.
Yeah. Somehow they just come out, like strings that come out. So, the Rashba brings down, the Rashba is a Rishon, he brings out that the Goinim already said that it's also b'melicha, and therefore a lot of people did not allow you to do melicha on it, and cook it. But the Mechaber says today we don't have a problem with it. The Ramah does not make any comment over here. But that's where it basically stands. Yeah, that's what we...
The first shach says that...
Was it the first shach?
First shach on the...
Oh, there it is. You're right. That's where it was. Yeah, so that's where it was in the beginning of Ein Hey. Because we're talking about organs, internal organs, that usually we're not machzikim bahem dam, like the Gemara says. V'nireli de'af harosh natur modin de bekurkeva machzikim dam. Sharaininu ra'ot yesh dam. Yeah, that's the one. We see with our eyes, he says that they have blood. Plus, he says he holds that kurkevan is not part of the internal organs that the Gemara had in mind. But others hold that it's just like the keres. Right, it has the same thing. Yeah, that's where it is in the beginning of Ein Hey. That's there. The two mention it, and they're machmer on it. Yeah, there's a long taz on this. Okay, just to finish up in Ein Hey. I don't know if we spoke about the eggs. That's an important thing. I mean, it could happen occasionally if you're a farmer and you're slaughtering your own chickens, you may find eggs inside the chicken that have not been laid yet. Alright, so the Ramah on Sif Aleph, in speaking about the chalchoiles, says be careful to salt it from the outside, not from the inside, otherwise it's like you didn't salt it. If it was cooked like that, it's treifa. If there's fat, but if you haven't cooked it yet, even though you salted it from the inside, go ahead and salt this chalchoiles, intestine, the rectum from the outside, and then umuteres. But eggs that have been found in birds after shchita, if only the yellow is finished and not the white, the complete egg, then they require melicha like other basar. We've talked a little bit about this before. We're talking about chicks that are forming, perhaps, fertilized eggs. And therefore there is the possibility here of it being just like meat. So you would need to salt it, if not all of it is formed. The Ramah says you can go ahead and salt it together with other meat. But in if the white is also finished, afilo aklipo akosha olav and the regular shell is already on it, like it's sold in the marketplace, we still have the custom of salting it, but be careful not to salt it together with other meat. Why? Because it could absorb, but it doesn't have anything to emit. So you won't be able to say kibolo kachpolta on the egg. The Ramah says, ein lochush, don't be concerned. Why not? Why don't be concerned? So the Vilna Gaon over here says very nicely. He says, first of all, the blia is only kedei klipa. Right? Melicha is only asus kidei klipa. So therefore, if it has a shell, the shell takes the place of the klipa. And even if it doesn't have the shell, remember what we learned before? That anything that needs a klipa, if it's a liquid and you cannot remove the klipa for some reason, it's okay. Remember that? You couldn't take the klipa because it was a liquid, and it requires a klipa and you didn't do it. And in certain situations, we just forget about it. So that's what the Gra says. That's what the Ramah says. It's okay if you did salt it together with other basar, the eggs, even though they should have been salted separately because they had the shell. The fat of the chicken has the same din of the fat of the meat, or the same din as the meat, as far as melicha and adacha. And that's very interesting because, as you know, chicken fat was very much used in the past in lieu of oil. Schmaltz, that can be bloodied also. So that would require melicha and adacha just like anything else, to remove any blood that may still be in there. See, if beis b'nei me'ayim below shuman shalem, but if they're internal organs without any fat, afal pi she'im machzikim b'hem dam mutar lemolchem baso. Even though we said before we don't hold that they have blood, you're allowed to salt it with other meat. That would not be a problem. Now, why would you be able to salt it if it doesn't have its own blood? So either you hold dam mishrik shorik, like the Taz brings down, that any blood that goes on will flow or spill over the organs will just slip off. Either you hold that, or it is possible, there's another thing that holds that all these internal organs, even though they don't have their own blood, they do have a tzir. They do have some liquid that comes out of them. And when you salt everything together, that liquid will be able to repel or hold back any blood from being absorbed in them. So if for some reason you wanted to salt everything together, it's okay. According to Shuchan Aruch, it's mutter. According to the Ramah, yesh oisun lemalchum basar, so lechatchila don't do it. Ve'ochi noegin lechatchila, but b'diavad it's mutter. So according to the Ramah, don't do it lechatchila, b'diavad it's mutter. On the Shuman Akanta, we said the Shulchan Aruch passes like the Rashba, that if you have an expert that knows how to remove the blood, then it's fine. Rashi holds that they need melicha just like any, because of the amount of blood in them. The Ran also. I think the Rashba says you can't cook it, but you can roast it. And the reason for that is because I think the Rashba holds that with Shuman Akanta, there's no way you can get all the blood out with melicha alone. So his opinion is just do tzli. But what I find is a problem with tzli is, how do you suggest to do tzli on fat? You're basically going to be burning everything up. You're going to melt the whole thing. So I'm not sure. I guess you can get away with it by doing a little bit of tzli, and then somehow get rid of any blood there, and then go ahead and eat it. Because if you apply too much heat to it, it's gone. We did say when we spoke about tzli that half a tzli is even sufficient, because then it becomes edible. Half a tzli, which we'll talk about in the next Siman, in din basar tzli, when you want to go ahead and take regular meat and prepare it for tzli. That's Siman Ayin Vav. What is that? No. That's what I gave you is just the internal organs. In Ayin Vav, you have the din. Let's just go one seif, and Mitzvah Hashem will get back after Tisha B'av. The first seif in Ayin Vav basically reads as follows: Din basar tzli. How do you prepare meat for roasting? At tzli ain't tzorich melicha at all. If you're going to be taking a piece of meat after it was slaughtered, and you took off the fats, you took off the chelev, everything is ready, and you don't want to cook it, and you just want to roast it, barbecue it, you don't need melicha. According to the Mechaber, because the fire basically is going to draw out all the blood. It's going to drip, as long as, of course, it has a place over to drip. That's very important. If you have dam ba'in coming down from somewhere else, that's going to be a problem. Even that blood is cold. But you don't say that the fire is going to burn it up, dry it out. On the contrary, it's going to go in it will asa kedei tila. So what's this all about? This is a big machlokes. The And basically, the machlokes goes as follows. Basar that you're going to do tzli, basar that you're going to prepare for roasting, does it require melicha or not? In other words, we're talking about the halachas of melicha. Melicha needs to done to a piece of meat in order to get the blood out. But does tzli require melicha too? Is there any clear halacha in the Gemara? Right? We take our source from the Gemara, and that's where the machlokes begin. When things are not 100% clear, either there's no conclusion in the Gemara, or there's two different opinions, and we don't know what the psak is. There's different Gemaras and there's different examples, and perhaps here yes and here not. And that's what happens in this particular case. The Rambam and the Rashi say, in their way, in how they understood, of course, the Gemaras, the various Gemara, Pesachim, and in this case it's Menachos. Rambam and Rashi say that they do require melicha. How do we know? Actually, before we get to how do they know, they do say that this is not a regular melicha. For example, Rashi holds that you don't need a lot of salt, just a little bit. The Rambam says you need, the way it's understood from the Rambam, I think the Maggid Mishnah says on the Rambam, one of the commentaries, that the Rambam meant it's not a regular melicha, meaning you don't need the same amount of time, but you do need a regular melicha. Okay, either way, they both hold that basar tzli does not require a regular melicha, and you basically, after you've done your salting, however much you put it salt, go ahead and roast it. You don't have to wait your 18 minutes and so forth. What made them think that that's all you need to do? Because there's an interesting Gemara in Menachos. In the Gemara in Menachos, in talking about the Evorim that were brought on the Mizbeach, in certain limbs that were brought on the Mizbeach, the Gemara over there says that you salt it, you turn it over, you salt it again, and then you put it on top of the Mizbeach. And then there's some mention over there, in the same way you do it here, you do it like that for tzli too. What's tzli got to do with this? So they learn, or they infer from that maybe that's what was meant. That when you're doing it for tzli, as opposed to kedera, which is the pot, that's what you would do. You would just cover it with salt a little bit, and then put it on the tzli.
But wasn't the Mizbeach?
Right. But the Mizbeach was just, remember, it was a sacrifice. It was a korban. We weren't going to eat it. So it's an interesting thing. It was just part of the ritual by the Mizbeach. Salt it, turn it over, salt it, put it on the Mizbeach. And in the same way, do this as when you do tzli. So Rashi and the Rambam are the ones that hold that even if you're doing tzli, you do require some fashion of melicha, even though it's not the ordinary melicha, because we see that's what's understood from the Gemara. Toises, the Rosh, the Ran, the Rosh were saying no. You don't need melicha at all. So in order to understand this a little bit more, well, maybe, I guess it's better if we just read it inside. The Mechaber holds like Toises. Mechaber says, Atzli ain't tzorich melicha. Let's get that out of the way. Mechaber is very clear that Atzli does not need melicha. And the Ramah is the one that brings the Yesh Oimrim, that Tzli bo yadocha tchila. Not only does it need melicha, it first needs to be rinsed. Yesh Oimrim the tzorich gamkin tzas melicha tchila, a little bit of melicha, which is Rashi. And the minig is dadicho tchila v'gam lemoil choik tzas. But the minig is to rinse it off a little bit, to salt it a little bit, when you already have it in the shput, kashanitcha v'beshput v'tzoleo miyad, kodesh yismal le'meradam, and of course you have to roast it right away before the salt has enough time to absorb the blood. You don't want that to happen. So you want it, right away after you salt it, you want to put it on the fire. Now, the Mechaber said on that, Rotzolim loyach tzli in Sif Beis, he wanted to salt the tzli, ule'oichloi below hadoch urar hadocha. Oy said you can do that, ve'ein lochush l'dam shalamelach. He says there's no concern about the dam on the melach, but yesh mishom dahane milik shemolcho v'tzolo miyad. So the Mechaber he's a little bit concerned that if you are going to salt it, you do the roasting right away. If you let it sit in the salt, then the salt will absorb the blood, the malach will become asur. Therefore, what you have to do after that is you would have to rinse it off if you left it long enough with the salt on it. Okay, so that's a separate concern. The concern that if you do put salt, don't leave it too long. Take it right away to the fire. You did leave it long. It did absorb the blood. It's a problem. You're going to want to rinse that salt off. Okay. The Ramah later on says, Ramah says if you did not rinse it out and you did not salt it at all, or you salted it without a dacha first, and you and you roasted this way, muta bilvad shelo shakam melichoso, as long as it did not sit in its salt too long, below hadacha, shiur melichoso, the shiur of melicha, which is 18 minutes. Then it would be also. And we're not going to go through the whole Ramah right now, but that's the gist of what the Ramah is saying, and the Mechaber pretty much agrees with it. But what's the svara over here, of requiring a little bit of melicha? Basically, I think we see from the Rishonim that there was a concern, if you're going to take this meat and cook it after the tzli, you're better off having salted it first, because then you were able to get out most of the blood out. That's the main svara, I believe. We'll look at it again next time, but that's otherwise, why should you need melicha? Think about it. The ash is not taking it out. So that was a question. Yes or no. That could be part of the problem. That's where there's a Maharam who says that if you're not going to cook it afterwards, after the tzliya, then you don't have a problem. Only if you want to cook it after the tzliya, it's going to be a problem, because maybe the tzli was not done 100%. Whereas we learned that the Isur Behet, I believe, says even if you do it halfway, you're fine. You don't have to worry about it. You've done everything right. If dam ba'in did fall from the outside, even though the Mechaber says Tzorach Netila, remember whoever follows the Ramah, we hold we're not bekim between kochosh and shaman. There's an opinion bichlal that tzli answers the whole thing. So according to the Shach and Taz, blood coming out on the tzli from somewhere else, raw meat or dam ba'in, I should say, would be aser till shishin, because we're not bekim ben kochosh the shaman. Meat could be fatty, so it's mefarpeah. Remember that. So that would, even though Mechaber says created. So the Pri Megadim, by the way, reminds us of something very interesting. The Pri Megadim over here says, don't forget, whenever we're makpid bin kochosh, that we're not bekim bin kochosh l'shom, it does not mean we forget about the netila. You still need the netila, he says, because that's where all the blood got concentrated. You're still going to have to take out the netila. The Pri Megadim writes a very important point here, because nobody else talks about it. I thought that was interesting, but we did cover it before. You're still going to need the netila, but that's the chumrah that the Shach and Taz bring, that we follow the Ramah, who says several times, since we're not baki b'kochosh l'shomish, it would ask till shishin. That's dam be'in. Dam be'in, that's even though it's cold, it's falling on the hot piece of meat. Tatoa gavar, the bottom one is stronger, it absorbs the whole thing. Dam be'in will not be somehow removed through the ish. Somehow the ish removes internal blood that's coming out from the meat, but not dam ba'in, which maybe has a different consistency somehow, or it just doesn't have the same effect. I think it would also depend how much dam ba'in, just a drop or two. I mean, I don't think.
When you say these things, sometimes I wonder if some of these food trays and it's sitting on the shelf. I once asked him, it's 72 hours. He said,
the water. If you change the water, then it's not a problem. So we'll talk about that. Remind me next time, 2 weeks from now, we'll talk about the 3 days. Because that's a very important halacha that we've covered in the beginning of Melicha, but it's actually important now, because now we're talking about Basar Litzli. When would be a situation where that's your only choice, it's not optional, when you can no longer do Bishul or Melicha because you've passed the time. So sometimes Tzli is the only thing you have left. Another option is you're stuck in the forest and you have no salt. Right? And you just caught a deer. He says, great, I brought my knife, but I don't have salt. So that's okay, you can eat it, as long as you do tzli. Just be sure there are no hyenas and coyotes while you're preparing your meat in the evening hours. Otherwise you'll have competition.
Guests.
Yeah, guests. Yeah. But anyway, so this is an important siman, and one of the more important simanim towards the end of Hilchos Melicha, and when and how to prepare basar just for Siman Hashem will continue 2 weeks from now.